the child didn't come out the shade you thought it should? $1,000 caring for a child you are positive is not your son. Clemens duped you into believing her 8-month-old son, Major, is yours. Say Mr. Bell's accusations are false.
I moved from California to go be out there with her with the baby. Diapers, car notes, strollers, boxes, everything. I've done everything.
But of course.
The baby looks white, Your Honor. This baby, I'm expecting a chocolate baby, and this baby came out white, Your Honor.
Come on now.
Yeah, and there's a white guy involved. That's why.
We actually met the day before that, and he wanted me to do his hair. It was never nothing physical, nothing.
The white guy want braids.
He has braids in his hair.
Okay, I actually have seen that before. So, relationship with a gentleman that was white. Are you asserting in this courtroom today that you believe he's the father of this child?
Yes.
In Judge Lake's courtroom, the atmosphere carries a weight that is different from ordinary family disputes. This is a space where truth is treated as a living force, where the relationship between law and justice is tested with every testimony, and where the outcomes are often permanent, emotional, and life-altering. When families arrive here, they do not simply come for answers. They come seeking closure, fairness, and clarity in moments clouded by fear, betrayal, and uncertainty. This courtroom is not just about paternity. It becomes a battlefield of identity, responsibility, and healing. In this particular case, several individuals have arrived with conflicting stories, emotional baggage, and deep mistrust, each convinced that their version of events is the correct one. The courtroom becomes a stage where accusations rise, memories clash, and long-kept secrets push their way into the open. At the center of it all stands Judge Lake, known not only for demanding accountability, but also for guiding families through the most painful chapters of their lives. Her role is not simply judicial. She becomes a voice of reason that blends compassion with firmness. As the parties step forward, Judge Lake immediately senses the tension. The man coming to court believes he has spent years caring for a child who may not be biologically his. He arrives emotionally exhausted, financially drained, and spiritually wounded. His experience echoes countless cheating stories, where people regret taking risks in relationships that lacked honesty and transparency. He is convinced that the DNA test will finally bring him the truth he deserves. There is frustration in his voice, but also a longing, an aching need for justice to prevail. Opposite him stands the woman who insists the child is unquestionably his. She carries her own pain, fear of losing support, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being judged not for her actions but for her circumstances. She claims loyalty, consistency, and certainty in her story, yet her behavior and past communication raise doubts. Both of them believe they are right. Both of them believe they are victims. And both of them know that the results will change everything. Judge Lake asks them about their relationship. What begins as a straightforward timeline quickly turns into a maze. They speak of disagreements, unplanned pregnancies, late-night calls, other romantic interests, mistrust by messages and social media activity, and the emotional fragility that often appears in unstable relationships. Their words reveal insecurities, misunderstandings, and emotional decisions made in desperation rather than clarity. As they speak, Judge Lake listens, not merely to the facts but to the patterns beneath the facts. She recognizes the signs from countless other cases she has handled: unresolved trauma, miscommunication that spiraled into chaos, and the repeated cycle that brings couples to court instead of mutual cooperation. Her courtroom is often the final stop when private conflicts explode into public legal battles. In the background of this paternity dispute lies a broader commentary on the concept of justice in jurisprudence, especially when it comes to family law. Judge Lake often explains that justice is not about punishing one side. It is about uncovering the truth, so a child's life is protected from confusion, abandonment, and instability. She reminds both parties that paternity is not just biological. It is emotional and legal, influencing everything from child support obligations to identity formation. During the hearing, she questions financial support. The man claims he paid thousands, diapers, housing support, travel bills. He speaks of sacrifices, including leaving his home state, losing time with his family, and trying to build a future based on trust. His frustration links closely to themes discussed on the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where legal professionals speak about how emotional decisions can lead individuals into complicated legal consequences. He believes he was manipulated into believing he was the father because he acted out of love, not logic. The woman, however, insists that everything he did was voluntary. She says she never forced him to pay for anything, never tricked him, never misled him. She argues that he knew exactly what he was getting into. Her confidence remains strong, but her timeline reveals inconsistencies. She describes friendships with other men, misunderstandings about intentions, and the presence of individuals whose involvement naturally raises suspicion. Judge Lake remains neutral but firm. She highlights how emotional arguments, denial, and defensiveness often weaken rather than strengthen credibility. She brings the discussion back to the child, reminding both parties that this case is not solely about adult disputes. It is about a child who depends on adults to make responsible choices. As the testimonies unfold, Judge Lake introduces the importance of legal principles such as adverse inference in evidence act, explaining that when one party conceals information or behaves suspiciously, the law sometimes allows judges to infer negative assumptions. This reinforces the seriousness of honesty in court. Evidence is not simply paperwork. It is the backbone of justice. The couple learns quickly that in the evidence stage in divorce cases and paternity cases, even one misleading statement can change courtroom outcomes. During this dispute, themes similar to those heard on Truth Changes Everything podcast emerge, stories where hidden secrets eventually surface, forcing people to face consequences they had avoided. Judge Lake sees this frequently. Individuals who regret taking DNA tests because they fear the truth, and others who regret not taking one sooner because they wasted years living inside a lie. This courtroom is where all those regrets collide and resolve. The child at the center of the case becomes the silent witness. Judge Lake emphasizes that regardless of the adult's anger, fear, or resentment, a child deserves stability and love, and that decisions must prioritize the child's. She often mentions the long-term consequences of confusion in identity, reminding everyone that generational patterns can be broken when truth is embraced. Many people who give Celebrate Recovery testimonies speak about healing only after acknowledging truths they tried to avoid for years. This case reflects the same principle. Healing starts when truth replaces assumption. The man's emotional breakdown during testimony reveals his painful childhood, growing up without parents, moving between foster homes, wishing for a stable family. His desire for a biological child stems from wanting to correct the brokenness he experienced. This vulnerability strikes the courtroom emotionally, reminding everyone how deeply paternity cases affect identity and self-worth. Meanwhile, the woman insists she wants a family too, yet her actions show conflict between desire and behavior. Judge Lake evaluates both stories carefully, balancing empathy with logical scrutiny. She acknowledges the pressures women face, but also addresses accountability. The courtroom serves as a mirror reflecting every person's choices, motives, and mistakes. By the time Judge Lake prepares to read the DNA test results, the courtroom is filled with tension. Both parties know that their futures hinge on this moment. The man fears losing a child he has grown attached to. The woman fears losing credibility, support, and stability. The child's future hangs in the balance, depending on a scientific proof that holds the power to reshape their lives. Judge Lake holds the envelope. She reiterates that the truth does not always match expectations, but it always brings clarity. Families from Adoption Stories' full episodes know the impact biological truth can have. Families involved in Supreme Court child support battles know how permanent these decisions can become. And people involved in paternity disputes understand that one test can either unite or divide a family forever. When she opens the results, the courtroom becomes silent. Her voice is steady as she prepares to announce the truth that will reshape everything that has been said, felt, and fought for inside this courtroom. The moment Judge Lake begins reading the DNA results, every heartbeat in the courtroom seems to slow down. The truth, which has been hovering like a silent presence throughout the hearing, is finally ready to reveal itself. Both parties brace themselves, knowing that whatever is written inside that envelope will either validate months of hurt or dismantle months of belief. In this courtroom, the DNA test is not just a document. It is the decisive force that has the power to confirm loyalty, expose betrayal, or force acceptance. Judge Lake reminds everyone that this is not about winning or losing. It is about clarity, accountability, and moving forward with integrity. She explains how law and justice intersect sharply in paternity cases. While the law looks at biological facts and tangible evidence, justice looks at emotional investment, lived experiences, and long-term consequences. When these two collide, families often find themselves confronting truths they never expected. Before she announces the results, Judge Lake highlights how this process reflects broader legal concepts often discussed in legal education and podcasts like the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, and even in structured programs like the Divorce Course podcast, where attorneys dissect how emotional choices impact legal outcomes. She explains that in real courtrooms, especially in paternity and child support cases, the evidence becomes the guiding light. It cuts through accusations, assumptions, and memories that may have been reshaped by hurt or fear. She turns to the man who brought the case, acknowledging his pain, his struggles, and the heavy history he carries. He listens intently, his hands clasped tightly together. His journey has been long, years of financial expenses, emotional bonding, and internal conflict. He came to this courtroom believing the system might finally help him reclaim the dignity he feels he lost. The sorrow behind his anger and frustration becomes clearer the longer he stays silent, waiting for the truth. The woman stands with equal tension. Despite her confident statements earlier, uncertainty flickers across her expression. She fears the judgment of society, the criticism from family, and the shame attached to being proved wrong in such a public way. Yet she also hopes the results will protect her reputation and secure stability for her child. For her, the courtroom represents validation, confirmation that she has been telling the truth all along. Judge Lake reads the result. When the truth lands, everything changes. Relief floods one face, devastation falls on another. The outcome becomes another example of how truth changes everything. It does not simply clarify facts, it redirects futures, reshapes identities, and redefines relationships. If the man is confirmed as the father, his heartbreak from doubt transforms into an emotional release. His tears reveal not only relief, but the weight of responsibility settling back onto his shoulders. His fears of betrayal dissolve into new fears: how to rebuild trust, how to parent responsibly, how to heal the emotional wounds that the doubt created. Judge Lake reminds him that biological truth is only the beginning. Emotional truth must now follow. If he is proven not to be the father, the reaction shifts dramatically. The shock, the pain, and the realization that years of dedication may have been based on misinformation create an emotional tremor. In such cases, Judge Lake often discusses the principle of adverse inference in Evidence Act, reinforcing how secrecy, dishonesty, or gaps in information can damage credibility and influence legal outcomes. She explains that if a mother hides the existence of other potential fathers, it can have serious legal consequences later. Regardless of the outcome, Judge Lake directs her attention to the child, because every paternity case eventually comes down to one central truth. Children suffer the most when adults fail to communicate honestly. Whether the parents reunite or separate, whether child support continues or ends, the child deserves emotional stability. She reminds them of how many individuals share their Celebrate Recovery testimonies, explaining how childhood confusion and abandonment can impact mental health for years. She makes it clear that this case must not become another example of generational pain. After the DNA results, the next phase of the hearing begins: accountability. If the man is the father, Judge Lake encourages him to step into the role with renewed commitment. She acknowledges his traumatic upbringing, growing up in foster care, yearning for a family, and reminds him that now he has the chance to break a cycle he once feared would continue through him. She explains how parenting is not about perfection, it is about presence. The emotional speech often resonates deeply, turning the courtroom into a reflective space where both parties confront their responsibility toward the child. The woman, meanwhile, is reminded to rebuild trust. If she was telling the truth all along, she is encouraged to acknowledge the hardships that grew from communication failure. Even innocent interactions can be misinterpreted when transparency is lacking. Judge Lake emphasizes the importance of clarity, especially in relationships shaped by young love, fear, or financial stress. She teaches them that emotional narratives must always match factual timelines, especially in legal matters. If the DNA results reveal he is not the father, Judge Lake transitions into a different set of legal realities. She explains how Supreme Court child support rulings across various jurisdictions highlight the importance of biological evidence. Men who are not the biological father are not obligated to continue paying support, unless they legally adopted the child or established paternity knowingly. In this case, because he doubted from the beginning and did not knowingly accept paternity permanently, he would not be legally bound to continue supporting the child. However, Judge Lake never stops at the legal ruling. She always brings attention to the emotional impact. She addresses the mother directly, explaining how dishonesty or omission hurts children more than it hurts partners. She reminds her that a child deserves to know their biological heritage and that hiding the truth creates confusion, resentment, and emotional damage later in life. Many heartbreaking adoption stories, full episodes, revolve around children, discovering late in adulthood that they were misled about their biological origins. For the man who was proven not to be the father, Judge Lake acknowledges the years of pain, financial burdens, emotional trauma, damaged reputation, even effects similar to those discussed in episodes of Truth Changes Everything podcast, where individuals confront life-changing revelations. She explains that the legal system gives remedies, but emotional healing must be found elsewhere. She encourages him to seek support, to rebuild his life, and to understand that this truth does not diminish his worth as a man or future father. The courtroom atmosphere remains heavy. These cases are never simple. They are built on layers of history, personal trauma, and emotional investment. Every person in the room carries a mix of relief, shock, confusion, or heartbreak. After addressing the adults, Judge Lake returns to the core principle: the child must be protected. She explains how children often internalize the emotions they witness, and how parental conflict can harm psychological development. Whether or not the man remains in the child's life, the mother must ensure that the child is surrounded with stability, honesty, and healthy guidance. This is where Lake blends legal authority with human compassion. She explains that justice in family court is never just about strict law. It is about promoting safety, clarity, and accountability. The relationship between law and justice becomes most visible in these moments, as she balances the legal ruling with emotional guidance. The parties then discuss their next steps. If the man is the father, they explore co-parenting strategies, financial stability, and communication improvements. Judge Lake advises them to avoid repeating old patterns, avoid arguments in front of the child, avoid involving relatives in conflicts, avoid using the child to express emotional hurt. She emphasizes mutual respect, urging them to collaborate for the sake of their child's future. If he is not the father, they discuss the legal process of removing his name from documents, halting support orders, and seeking out the biological father. The mother often becomes emotional in this moment, realizing she must now confront someone from her past and navigate a new legal process. Judge Lake encourages her to prioritize honesty moving forward, reminding her that this is the moment where she can change the story for her child. The courtroom slowly absorbs the impact of the truth. Some tears reveal pain, others reveal relief. The reactions echo the stories shared on cheating stories platforms where betrayal intersects with legal outcomes, or the insights heard on legal podcasts where attorneys analyze how relationships fall apart when trust is broken. Judge Lake concludes the session by reminding everyone that truth is not an enemy. It is a foundation. Whether painful or comforting, truth opens the door to healing, stability, and the possibility of a better future. This case, like many others she handles, becomes a testimony to how the justice system, DNA science, emotional resilience, and legal reasoning come together to transform lives. As the courtroom begins to settle after the powerful reveal of the DNA results, the environment carries an unmistakable blend of exhaustion and awakening. Every paternity case in Judge Lake's courtroom ends with a moment of profound silence, a silence in which truth sinks deeply into everyone present. The adults try to collect themselves, but the emotional impact is too strong to conceal. Truth has done what truth always does. It has corrected assumptions, redefined relationships, and illuminated everything that had been hidden in shadows. Judge Lake uses this moment to shift from the result to the responsibility that follows it. For her, paternity cases are not only about identifying biological facts, they are about teaching individuals how to build healthier emotional and legal habits. She often reminds litigants that the courtroom is not a place of punishment, but a place of clarity. It is where the mistakes that brought them here can be transformed into lessons that guide them forward. She begins this final phase by addressing the man at the center of the case. Whether he has been confirmed as the father or cleared of all biological responsibility, his emotional journey remains equally valid. She acknowledges his courage, coming forward, facing public scrutiny, confronting fear, and demanding answers. Many men hide from paternity doubts. Many avoid court out of shame or anger. But he stepped into the truth, and Judge Lake recognizes that courage openly. She explains how his experience mirrors the real-life stories examined in investigative podcasts and legal discussions. From the Truth Changes Everything podcast to episodes that explore how evidence reshapes families on the Divorce Course podcast. In each platform, people speak about how their lives were transformed once they stopped running from the truth and started facing it directly. He is now part of that narrative, one in which truth becomes the turning point rather than the enemy. Next, Judge Lake turns to the mother. Her role is equally important and her journey is equally complex. If she was proven correct, she must now commit to communication, consistency, and transparency, 3 qualities that would have prevented this conflict from growing into a legal battle. If she was proven wrong, she must accept the consequences of silence, omission, or confusion in her past decisions. Judge Lake guides her carefully, reminding her that the emotional and social burden she carries is heavy, but she can transform the narrative from pain to accountability.